Hi to those of you who are super keen and have already joined us. I'm just adding our amazing guests who we've got joining us today.
Hello.
Hi Jade.
Hello.
And hello Kira.
Hi guys, how are you today?
Good,
Very
thank
well,
you.
thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I am good. Are we okay on all the kind of feedback and everything? I feel like I'm getting echoes.
Yeah, I had a little bit and it went quite quiet. I don't know if it's gone quiet for you as well.
It actually seems okay now. So welcome both of you. Great that the beginning has all gone off seamlessly. So welcome everyone to our Instagram Live, which we're doing during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The theme this year is Unite to End Digital Violence Against All Women and Girls. So today we're going to be talking about online and tech facilitated abuse, a really fast growing form of abuse that's often used to facilitate other forms of abuse. And we're going to be thinking about how technology and AI is increasingly being used as a tool for abuse and control, particularly against women and girls, and then what needs to address this. So I'm Lisa from SARSAS, and we're a charity based in the Southwest. Our vision is a world without sexual violence. We listen, believe, and support survivors while advocating for an end to sexual violence so that everyone can live a life free from abuse and its impacts. I'm joined today by two brilliant experts. So I have Kira Brody, who is the Tech Abuse Training Lead from Refuge's Specialist Technology Facilitated Abuse and Economic Empowerment Team. Refuge is the largest specialist domestic abuse organisation in the UK, and they support thousands of women and their children, helping them to overcome the physical, emotional, financial and logistical impacts of abuse and rebuild their lives free from fear. And we have Jade, who is our training lead at SARSAS, and Jade delivers our training around online abuse and all other topics around sexual violence. And she was also previously a domestic abuse worker with experience of supporting people affected by tech facilitated abuse. So thanks so much, both of you, for being here today. Before we get started, just a quick note to anyone who's watching. We will be talking about abuse, and while we won't be going into details, it might bring up difficult things, or some of it might be difficult to hear about. So please do take care of yourself while you're watching. We'll be sharing the live later on, so if it's better to listen at a different time, that's always an option for you. And if you need support, we'll also be sharing details of supporting organisations that you can contact. If you have any questions or comments, we will try and kind of keep track of them and answer as many as we can. But we may also just get really caught up in our conversation. So shall we get started?
Yes.
Fabulous. So given that we already live in a world where at least 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence globally, and in England and Wales, 1 in 4 women have been raped or sexually assaulted since the age of 16, and 1 in 4 women in England and Wales will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. We're also now looking at a rapidly increasing threat of online and tech facilitated abuse, either as part of that or in addition to it. So when we caught up ahead of today, Kira shared with me that the Refuge Specialist Tech Team saw a 92% increase in referrals in the first 6 months of 2024 compared to that same period in 2019. And I know that at SARSAS, more of the clients that are coming to us, they often talk about how tech is a part of the abuse that they've experienced offline as well. So it's becoming more and more prevalent in the work that we're doing. So when we talk about tech facilitated abuse, it might mean different things to different people. What do we actually mean by that? And Kira, you might be good to kind of start off from your sort of point of expertise.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Everything
Yeah,
all right?
brilliant. Thank you.
Perfect. I think it's important to note that obviously tech abuse isn't specifically mentioned in the 2021 Domestic Abuse Act. And I think, as you so well put it, Lisa, you know, when we couple this with the changing nature of tech and just, you know, how evolving it is, it becomes really hard, I think, to form this like nice, neat kind of tied with a bow definition. But essentially in our team, what we always say is that technology facilitated abuse is the same old abuse that we've always seen. It's just that technology has made it easier for perpetrators to abuse survivors. So it's another way of instilling fear, exerting control, or, you know, causing harm via the misuse of technology. And I think one of the things that's really difficult around tech facilitated abuse is that we tend to focus so much on those, you know, new emerging forms of harm, which are really, really important, don't get me wrong. And I know we're going to touch on some of them today. But when we're looking at kind of defining and conceptualizing tech facilitated abuse, we have to understand not just those emerging trends, but also take into account all of the different forms of technology that are already being created and that are already being used to carry out harm towards survivors of domestic abuse and sexual exploitation. So I know that's a bit long-winded, but as I said, it's quite complicated.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because it's not like this is suddenly just, you know, everyone's talking about it now all of a sudden with the growth of AI and everything, but actually tech has been used for a considerable amount of time to sort of facilitate or perpetrate various forms of abuse. Jade, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I suppose just to echo exactly what you said. And when I was kind of researching for the training that we've created around tech facilitated abuse, that's something that I really kind of focused on a bit as well. Is like, actually, this hasn't just kind of come out of nowhere. You know, where did this start? Where does this come from? And I think, as you say, you know, tech has grown really rapidly over the past, you know, 10, 15 years. It's become such a big part of our life. So we're seeing it a lot more. We're seeing it being used more frequently. But it has been a part of abuse for so long. Even things such as like in film and TV, just the way women might have been shot, you know, the camera angles, the lighting, etc. That could all be a part of, you know, tech misogyny. And we often forget sort of where this has kind of started, and this is all about, you know, our societal views, misogyny, etc. And it's not a brand new thing, but we're just seeing it being done in new ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And so, why do we think it is that it is suddenly such a kind of growing issue, and that we've really seen, you know, Kira, sort of, you've had a real rise, haven't you, in kind of people coming through to your tech abuse team? Why do we think that might be?
I'm happy to go. I don't want to talk over you, Jane.
Yeah, no, please just kind of, yeah, come in.
I know, I don't want to talk over anyone, so apologies. I think there's a couple of different factors. I mean, one, I would say that exactly what you both said, you know, that actually this hasn't, you know, just sprung up out of nowhere. It's been going on for decades. And actually, when you look back at domestic abuse related death reviews, you know, as far back as, you know, the early 2000s, there are tech components in them. It's just that I think it wasn't picked up and it wasn't addressed really as tech facilitated abuse in its own right. And I think the other reason that I'd say there's maybe an escalation or increasing identification of this issue is because so much of our lives nowadays are online compared to, you know, the early 2000s. You know, if you want to get a GP appointment, you're filling out an online form. You know, a lot of uni courses, for example, just take place online. And I think as tech is becoming more and more, you know, interwoven into our lives, the opportunities for abuse, unfortunately, are escalating. And it's also becoming even harder to navigate that if you're in a stage of recovery from tech abuse as well, I would say.
And it's also getting easier and easier to use, isn't it? So you don't have to be an expert anymore to kind of work out how to use all these different sort of platforms and devices. Jade, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I completely agree. I think it is so much more accessible. And I think as well, maybe forms of tech facilitated abuse that we've seen in previous years where tech hasn't been so advanced has become really normalized. So, for example, if people are tracking their partner or sending them abusive messages via, a phone, that's not always recognized as being abuse. Whereas I think where we're seeing technology becoming more advanced, we're seeing it become more obviously abusive. I had to put my cat away earlier as well.
Sorry, he's broken into the room. I put him out earlier. He's broken back in.
They're sneaky, aren't they? But yeah, I think now it's becoming more clearly abusive to people, to maybe where they weren't able to recognize it before. Now they are. So I think that potentially plays a part in it as well.
And in terms of because we can kind of talk about the big picture of abuse and the different types of abuse and what it looks like, but actually we're all really, as organisations, really survivor focused. So when we're talking about tech abuse, what does that mean, or what does that look like in terms of the kind of impact that it can have on survivors or people that are experiencing it? Jade, did you want to go first?
Yeah. I think it can be very invasive. I think this kind of removes element where, maybe, for example, someone has put cameras in somebody's home or something like that. They're not always sure if they may have removed them all, or there might be something funny happening with their technology, but they don't know what's going on, and they may not know to what level someone has interfered with their technology. So I think this kind of unknown element, that kind of removed element of not knowing exactly what a person may have done, not knowing if it's been fully removed, that can be really, really difficult for people. I was talking with Emily, actually, who's helping us with our tech facilitated abuse training, and she was saying that they've now been introducing digi-dogs in different police forces to sniff out technology in people's homes. Because I know I've certainly worked with people where they've reported to the police that there's technology in their home that they didn't consent to being there, and the police haven't been sure if they could get it all because it can be hidden in so many different and creative ways. And I think it really feeds into the kind of gaslighting. If you think about the term gaslighting, where it came from, that play where there's like the gas powered lamps on the wall and the husband will alter the kind of light level. And then when the wife is saying like, oh, it seems really dark or it seems really bright, the husband would be saying, no, it's not. And I think we've kind of come back to that in a way as well, where you can see like smart home tech being used. So I think it feeds into the gaslighting element as well. And I think there's this idea that it's not as serious if it happens online, or, the impact's not as bad. And I think that can make people question their own experiences.
Thank you. And Kira, because I know a lot of what you do at Refuge, you kind of also look at how tech abuse kind of overlaps with other forms of abuse, like emotional or financial abuse. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, apologies, I live in a flat, so, in this day and age, you can't get away with
We've got cats,
probably
got
the Amazon
doorbells,
delivery driver trying to deliver to one of my neighbours. But yeah, I think, just like our phone, it's literally like pretty much surgically attached to us nowadays. I'd say, technology is kind of interwoven in all those different aspects of abuse. So, for example, in terms of technology facilitated physical abuse, it can be things like the destruction of technology, which often can be actually a precursor to kind of skin on skin physical abuse. And, there's a reason why we're the tech and economic team, because there's a huge intersection between tech abuse and economic abuse. And we think about, just how much of our kind of interactions and transactions and kind of financial responsibility takes place online, that actually you can't, I would say, in this day and age, separate out the two. And I think 100% just to agree with what Jay said around the kind of psychological and emotional impact of this abuse. It's very gaslighting. We have so many survivors come to us going, they don't know how tech's being misused. They just notice that something's up, that something's us. And unfortunately, I think if professionals aren't trained to kind of identify or kind of validate these survivors' experiences, they sometimes also contribute to this gaslighting impact. So it's kind of doubly re-traumatizing almost for the survivor. You know, everything the perpetrator said about, you know, you won't be believed, or even I'm not doing that, why are you making these claims, kind of gets compounded and reinforced. So I think there can be not just the impact around how it's connected with all these different types of abuse, but I think how survivors then engage with services, you know, can also have a further negative impact if it's not met with, you know, empathy and belief, really.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because actually one of the other things I was going to bring up is around kind of what are some of the barriers or challenges that survivors and people that are experiencing this kind of abuse face if they're sort of looking to report or looking for support, and that's definitely one of them. And I think also the kind of evolving nature of the type of abuse means that people might not necessarily even initially recognize as what's happening as a form of abuse itself. And I think also it's really important to kind of emphasize that it actually, like a lot of, you know, like abuse and other forms in terms of kind of digital abuse, that people who also face intersecting, you know, or multiple disadvantage are often disproportionately affected by digital abuse, as with other forms of abuse. So they kind of face additional barriers alongside that in kind of speaking to someone about getting support or reporting. Anything else that anybody wanted to add?
I just wanted to emphasize that kind of final point you made, because I think as we're kind of talking about, and I think we've all kind of alluded to, you know, like you said, there's kind of genuinely been quite a lack of awareness around tech-facilitated abuse. But I think, like you said, those intersecting, the intersectionality approach to it, I think has really genuinely not been there at all, you know. And I know you mentioned at the start, you know, how tech abuse looks different for other people. You know, we've got, just take intimate image-based abuse, for example. We have, you know, LGBTQIA survivors who are not necessarily being threatened with images of them in a quote-unquote sexual state, but are being threatened with being outed, for example. They have images of their maybe dead name, you know, prior to transition. And, you know, if someone's threatening to post that online, that's not just opening someone up to intimate image-based abuse, but, you know, transphobia, homophobia, hate crimes, for example. We also have survivors from, you know, different black backgrounds and religious beliefs. You know, they're having, you know, the images again are not kind of quote unquote sexual by a maybe white Western standard, but actually what they are is someone being threatened without their headscarf or the hijab on, for example. And this has a huge impact on these survivors. But I don't think those cultural or kind of like nuances are really considered, because I think our understanding of tech abuse is still very, very new, that we're not really looking into those intersectional aspects, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And actually there was an article that I was reading yesterday that came out around a report that was just commissioned by the Office of the Police Chief Scientific Advisor, where they surveyed 1,700 people, and they found that 13% of those people felt that there was nothing wrong with creating and sharing sexual or intimate deep fakes. So there's clearly like a really big education piece around this that needs to happen. And actually then, of the 7% of those respondents who'd been depicted in a kind of sexual or intimate deep fake, only 51% of those had reported to the police. And one of the most commonly cited reasons for that was either embarrassment or uncertainty that the offence would be taken seriously. So, I mean, it kind of has echoes of, you know, the multiple reasons why people don't report rape or sexual assault, that kind of fear of sort of not being believed or taken seriously. But it really kind of demonstrate all those kind of barriers and challenges that we've been discussing. There's so much that we could talk about today that when I was thinking about it, I was like, there's this and there's this and there's this. But it would be really good, I think, to touch on the emerging threats, because I've just talked about deepfakes, of AI and the effect that that's having on online and technology facilitated abuse. Things like deepfake images and impersonation and sort of manipulated content content. A stat that I read was that 96% of deep fake images that are created are non-consensual pornography, and that of that 96%, 99% are of women. So I think that really kind of demonstrates the gendered nature of this particular threat. Did you have any thoughts on that, Kira, on sort of AI generally? And
Yeah, I mean, I would say AI is within our team something that I think gets talked about pretty much on a daily basis, and been a real point of interest for our team genuinely, because I think, you know, AI has completely changed the way we function, and unfortunately it is reshaping, I think, the violence against women and girls landscape. And yeah, I think in terms of one of the points I would say around AI is kind of really concerning is one, its contribution to, you know, online misogyny in the manosphere. So there's actually a term for it now called AI manosphere, which is basically how AI is reinforcing these gendered stereotypes,
yep,
and contributing to kind of online misogyny in these spaces. And it's, you know, manifesting in loads of different ways. I think deepfakes is a really good is not the right word, but it's a really, I think, relevant example to make. But it's also other things like AI companions, for example, is a huge growing area of this. And actually, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of stories coming out around how these AI chatbots or these companions are also being used as kind of like training tools almost for misogynistic behavior. So it's like getting an AI chatbot to beg you not to turn them off, for example, or being abusive towards the chatbot. And when you think about what that maybe does for, you know, the wider societal impact here, you know, it's training people, one, that potentially someone is meant to be as biddable and as accepting and submissive, exactly like an AI chatbot is. And then also, would that increase the risk that individuals, if they don't respond the way that a chatbot does, you know, if someone is taught to expect that or believe that's how people function or engage in normal, healthy relationships, and then they don't get that kind of biddable, malleable response, what's the risk to that person? So I think not only is it impacting survivors on kind of an individual level, but I think it's definitely contributing to, you know, unfortunately, the misogyny that we see within society generally.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Jay? Did you have any thoughts around AI?
Yeah, just to echo that, I think firstly a concern of mine is around the fact that AI is often built without representation from the people building it. So it's not like a truly representative group of people creating it. And often kind of safeguards and potential harms aren't considered when it's being released. It's usually sort of after it gets released that it's then a bit of a scrabble to be like, oh no, we didn't expect this. So that's kind of my first worry. And also around, you know, AI learns from its environment, and the environment that it's learning from is unequal, and that we do see misogyny, racism, ableism, homophobia, etc. So it is learning those. And studies are showing that, for example, things like job applicants, when it's AI is being used to review job applicants, it's often favouring men, for example. So we are seeing those biases being reinforced, continuing with AI. And again, to really echo that around the AI companions, the AI girlfriends, I do really have a lot of concerns around future generations and what this will mean for their relationship skills. I watched an interview from Laura Bates, and she was talking about how, you know, you have a AI girlfriend, you can design what it looks like, you can choose its personality, you can put it in your pocket when you don't want to talk to it, and it just really reinforces this idea that women are there to serve, that, you know, the relationship needs are all about the man and not that kind of two-way dynamic. And I do worry about the impact it will have on those future generations.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for mentioning Laura, because I do have to mention Laura Bates today, because we're really lucky to have Laura as our patron at SARSAS. And she has just released a new book all around AI, called The New Age of Sexism, How the AI Revolution is Reinventing Misogyny. and she makes some really amazing points in there, particularly around how AI is sort of currently being developed and launched before the work around safety has actually been designed in a way that we would never do with any kind of product and just release it onto the market. And she says, you can't say I manufacture food. You can't expect me to protect all the people we sell food to. Like, some of them are going to get poisoned. That's not on me. We wouldn't allow that from a food manufacturer. Yet there's all these kind of tech and AI tools just going out into the world, then trying to kind of keep up with the harms that they're causing afterwards, rather than kind of designing and building that safety in from the start. And now is the time, like now is the opportunity where we can do something about that before we kind of walk into this future where we've kind of lost all control of how those tools are used and how we can and legislate, because once they're kind of out there, it's much harder to roll it all back. So why do we think this seems to affect women and girls so disproportionately? I mean, I think we've kind of touched on it a bit with the way that, you know, particularly when looking at algorithms and things like that are designed, those biases are often built in. But why else do we think that women and girls are affected disproportionately by these forms of abuse? Jade, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think partly we need to think about the society that we live in. We do live in a society that is patriarchal, and therefore we are seeing misogyny, racism, homophobia, ableism, etc. So I think that does, of course, play a part in it. And I think the rise of the use of technology, social media, we see the algorithms being used. I saw as well that studies have shown that it's only 17 minutes before a young boy's brand new social media account is shown extreme misogynistic content. And we know it can be a pipeline. You know, it can start with, you know, maybe preying on someone's vulnerabilities, maybe the fact that they're feeling a bit isolated, a bit confused, a bit unsure of themselves. And the content can grow increasingly extreme. And then we see those echo chambers as well, and where people are spending so much of their time online and they're being shown this like increasingly harmful content, and they're being really kind of like sucked into it. I think that does play a big part, these kind of algorithms and the echo chambers.
Thank you. Kira, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase sounding like a broken record to completely echo everything that's already said. I think AI is representative of society, and unfortunately there are a lot of gender inequalities that are existing. You know, it's learning off of large data sets, that the largest data set of them all is the internet, which unfortunately for as long as it's been around has disproportionately harmed women and girls. And I think also another aspect that's kind of, I'd say, proliferating that in a way is we're kind of caught up in this AI arms race at the moment. You know, not to get political, but it's been very well known that, you know, the UK government is prioritising kind of AI innovation, for example, and it's been allowed to kind of, like you said, Lisa, develop at this kind of breakneck speed. And if that's going to carry on, you know, who is it that's going to be harmed? It's going to be the people that are already suffering the consequences of this like unchecked development. So it's kind of almost reinforcing those gaps, and like you say, kind of not just extending the inequalities regarding gender, but the inequalities regarding race, ableism, sexuality, for example, because AI doesn't love things like gender fluidity, for example. It loves binaries. And actually anything that's sitting in the grey, it's still really struggling to kind of process. And we're not rectifying or, you know, looking for new data sets to train these algorithms in many ways, which means that, as Jade so articulately put, these biases from society are translating into these platforms, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. And it does feel a bit like, as a society, we're kind of behind the curve in keeping up with all of these changes and platforms and being able to respond to tech abuse. Beyond sort of thinking not just around sort of individual safety, but more kind of what we can do at both the sort of tech and a policy level. what do you think needs to change? What can we do now to try and prevent sort of further harm in the future? Kira, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big question, but I think there's definitely a lot that can be done. Obviously, I think the kind of easy answer to this, I think, is improved legislation to address some of the gaps in the legislation that exist. You know, the Online Safety Act did a bit in terms of addressing some of them, but obviously this is a huge issue. It's not going to be solved by one piece of legislation.
Yeah.
So I think we definitely need this area to be regulated, and for violence against women and girls to be included as part of that legislation. I know there's the AI regulation bill that's kind of been working its way kind of through Parliament, but you know, we really need the harms that this technology is being done to be kind of captured in that. Yeah. But I think in the meantime, what we also need is greater education about how we can use existing laws creatively. You know, a good example of this, for example, is the Protection of Children Act, which obviously regulates child sexual abuse material, and they're starting to bring convictions for AI generated CSAM under this legislation, which is really positive. You know, they're kind of treating it like, if it looks real enough, we're going to treat it as a real image, which I think is really positive. So I don't think it's about necessarily always waiting for the new legislation, but how can police officers actually use existing legislation in a way to capture these emerging harms? Because we need the law to be flexible. We're not living in a day and age when this stuff is static, and the minute the law's made, it almost is going to become out of date a little bit. So actually we need to make sure that that flexibility is almost inbuilt, or that flexibility is offered. And this is an issue not just for kind of police education, but, you know, the whole judicial system, you know, CPS, judges as well, in having that flex application of the law to encapsulate these harms.
Yeah, thank you. Jay, did you have anything to add?
I completely agree with what you just said, and I think as well a point to consider is that, you know, we don't want to kind of hang around and wait for the creators of the tech or social media to kind of do it themselves, because unfortunately they're showing that they're not taking the issue seriously enough. They know that harm is being, you know, perpetrated on their platforms with their tech, and we're currently seeing very little action being taken, and ultimately it's often making them a lot of money, you know, people engaging in all this harmful behavior, and sadly we see them kind of putting the profits first. So I think we do need action to be taken rather than just to kind of wait. But I'd also like to see more kind of conversations around how do we prevent this, you know, how do we engage the people who are causing harm, or who are starting to kind of go down those harmful routes of, you know, going down the misogynistic content, the echo chambers. How do we engage with them? How do we help them to understand what harmful behavior is and how to stop that behavior? I'd love to see more conversations around that.
Yeah, thank you. And I've just totally forgotten what I was going to say then.
I do that all the time.
I'm so sorry. Oh yeah, so I was just going to ask if there's any kind of positives coming out of the use of AI or tech that might actually kind of work in favour of addressing violence against women and girls. That, you know, we've focused a lot on the negative, of which there is a lot. But are there any sort of positive ways that tech can be used to actually reduce or help prevent violence against women and girls? Kira?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question. You must find this as well, Jade. You know, when you're training people on tech, at the end of sessions, they kind of go, I just want to throw my phone in the river and live in a little cabin in the middle of the woods. And actually, it's important we remember that tech is not all good, it's not all bad. And actually, we don't want to focus, it's important to focus on the technology, but we don't want to focus too much that it removes the accountability from the people who are doing harm via these platforms, you know, and we want that accountability to lie with the perpetrators. But yeah, I just want to flag, you know, some amazing people operating in the space. You know, there's people like this Image Angel, which is helping to basically hold accountability for around kind of intimate image-based abuse. There's obviously the Survivor AI resources that's been made by Chain, or Cheyenne. I never pronounce it right, but amazing organization regardless, to help survivors kind of create like image takedown letters. There's also Resolver. It's got kind of an unknown CSAM detection service as well that they're developing as well, which is really, really amazing. So I think there are a lot of people in this space who are trying to use AI in a way that is as ethical to kind of tackle these issues, but also just improve kind of accountability within the tech sphere generally. But I think, as Jade really well pointed out, we can't wait for the tech companies, but we do need some accountability with the tech companies to, utilize these amazing tools that are being developed and created.
Yeah, and it needs that kind of political and sort of public will, doesn't it, to drive legislation that's going to prevent abuse, but also and keep up the technology and kind of use it in positive ways to help us really kind of address and prevent Borg. So I know, Kira, that on your on the Refuge website, you've got lots of information and tools around kind of using tech and things that people can do to make themselves, feel safer when they're navigating the online world. Can you just sort of talk a little bit about that, just so people know what to look for?
Thanks for the shout out, Lisa. I appreciate it. So we have our Refuge Tech Safety website, which is refugetechsafety.org.uk. So we've got on that website a range of different guides around how to secure different platforms. We've also got kind of different tools like our digital breakup around how to secure different forms of different apps, for example, and different forms of technology around the home, which is really great resource, which is been really well received. And I think the other thing I just want to say around kind of helping secure ourselves, it sounds really boring and there might be people watching this rolling their eyes, but good digital hygiene is so important. It's annoying, but we don't do it. Two-factor authentication accounts, checking our linked accounts, checking our recovery details, strong long passwords not used across multiple accounts, and checking things like our digital footprint, knowing what information is out there about us is honestly half the battle sometimes. And these things seem really simple, but I do want to kind of end our conversation on a bit of hope that actually some of these like easy steps can make a real difference in making sure our tech is secure and helping to start mitigating around some of these risks.
Yeah, thank you. And I think to kind of end on a message of hope, there's a lot more that we could have talked about today, and we've kind of done a whistle-stop tour of a lot of different topics, but it's been really great to chat about them. But I'm sure at Refuge, the same as at SARSAS, we do believe that a world without gender-based violence is possible and that it's not inevitable. And that's why we're kind of doing all this work to try and raise awareness and prevent, whilst also supporting people who've been affected by it. We've put some support details as well in a pinned comment for anyone who's watching this, who's been affected by any form of abuse, or if you know someone who has. So those details are there for you. And you can also follow us on Instagram, where we kind of post regularly about sort of information about different forms of abuse, but also lots of support information as well. Before we finish today, is there any sort of last thing that you'd like to add? Jade, I'll start with you. Any kind of final reflection?
Ooh. I suppose, again, just to highlight that there is hope out there. Like you said, it's not all bad. Technology has great potentials. It can really be used to promote people's voices who might be more marginalized. It can be used to educate. It can be used for health. It can be used for so many good things, but we just want it to be properly regulated, so we see it being used only for good and not for harm as well.
Thank you, Jade. And how about you, Kira?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to echo everything that's been said, I think as much as difficult and hard as these conversations are, it's actually such a win in itself that we're actually starting to have these. Once we recognise and we start to identify and talk about the issues, that's when real solutions happen. And I think there's some incredible cross-sector work that is being done. And I do think that momentum is starting. We just need to kind of all kind of play our part to help continue that, really. So yeah, just to echo the message of hope, really.
Thank you. Well, thank you both of you so much for joining me today. It's been great to chat. Could definitely go on for a lot longer. So yeah, maybe we can do another one sometime. It's been really great. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise and experience. And finally, if anyone's watching and you or someone you know has been affected by anything that we've talked about today, please know that it wasn't your fault. There is support and there's specialist help from people who will listen and believe you. So we shared those details in the chat. But thanks again, and thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you as well, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, both of you. Take care.
Bye.